You're listening to Parents You've Got This, the expert guide to parenthood.
The complete guide to pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood.
In today's episode of the Expert Guide to Parenthood podcast, we're talking all about tantrums. So we're welcoming back our child psychologist expert, Dr. Deirdre Bradner, to give us her tips and tricks on how to deal with those big tantrums.
Yeah, parenting can be a wild ride, and we are so lucky to have Dee back here with us today. Dr. Deirdre Bradner is a child psychologist and has worked with thousands of families. She has worked with little ones, she has worked with teenagers, and she is so well versed to come on today and talk to us all about this topic, which just tugs at all of our heartstrings. So we are so fortunate to have her. She is also a renowned presenter. She is a mum herself, and she just knows the ins and outs of this topic. So we are so excited to pick her brain. Welcome back, Dee. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Can we talk first of all today about what we can expect from our little ones when they're around the age of 2 to 3? What is normal behaviour, and what can we expect from them?
Around 2 years of age, there's still a lot going on for our little people. Their brains are still developing. They're struggling with the ideas of wanting to be autonomous but still feeling clingy, and it means that there's so much they want to be exploring and learning, but sometimes those emotions just get too much for them.
And how much of their brain is developed already? What can we, reasonably expect them to understand?
So we know that by around this age, their receptive language is more developed than their expressive language. So they're better at understanding than actually explaining. But we do know that part of their brain, the prefrontal cortex, is one of the most important parts of the brain. And this is the last part to develop. It's about decision making, impulsivity. So deciding what's going to happen where and how that looks is still a work in progress for our toddlers.
So, Dee, then what can we expect them to understand if we can see that they're in a situation that might be challenging? How can we communicate with them, and what can we actually expect them to take on board in that situation?
That's a great question. So it's really important that we give instructions one step at a time. As grown-ups, we're pretty much used to talking to explain. Toddlers can't take in a lot of information. So short directions, lots and lots of visuals, and lots of modelling is the way that your toddler is going to be able to understand what they need to be doing.
So can toddlers understand rules? Like, can you set limits for a toddler, or is it just whatever goes?
So it's not so much about rules, it's about expectations. And when we think about rules and expectations for our toddlers, it's about keeping them safe. Setting limits, having boundaries that we know create a safe space for them to explore and play.
So how do we do that, Dee? How do we set limits for our little ones?
It's about what we call teach and talk. So narrating what's happening, being specific about what they can be doing, and redirecting often is really important. We all know how focused a toddler can get at touching a PowerPoint, and but the and redirect is possibly the best way to start with rule setting around dangerous items.
And so toddlers' tantrums are obviously a big part of just their development. What can we expect around tantrums? How many do they have? Are they normal part of development? Can you limit them?
They are absolutely normal and essential for brain development and self-regulation. We know that toddlers will have at least one tantrum a day, sometimes up to 9 a week, and it can depend on a lot of factors. But they happen because they haven't developed their expressive language. They can't communicate their frustration, or sometimes they can't communicate what's happening for them and how they're perceiving a situation.
So what do we do then, Dee, if our toddler is having a tantrum? Like, what is the most appropriate way to react to them and to support them through that challenge?
And you've touched on a really great point there. It's about supporting them through it. They need to feel connected to us. It's not yelling, admonishing them, comparing them to what they should be doing is not helpful. It's giving that language that I understand this is tricky for you. Let's get calm and work out what we can do next.
Yeah, because I can understand if you're a toddler and you don't necessarily understand everything. But, you know, it might be hard to understand what people are saying. If you don't have the communication skills, you might not have the language yet to talk about how they're feeling. What do you do in those circumstances?
So remember, our toddlers are very egocentric. It's all about them. And we need to keep that in mind, because their frustration about why they can't get what they need is really difficult. So it is about explaining briefly what is going to be happening and being firm and fair but kind. They are the three most important rules for us as parents to keep in mind.
So Dee, if there is a situation like you touched on it before, where there's a safety issue or there's a definite boundary that can't be crossed.
Yes.
How do we go about saying no to a toddler?
So I always say avoid saying no. Now that sounds like a ridiculous statement, but it's actually about I want yogurt, and saying no, you can't have yogurt. It would be we're having yogurt after dinner. So it's redirection. When somebody, wants to play with that pair of scissors, we're saying the scissors are staying here, you can have this instead. So as soon as a toddler, or even a lot of us here know, they get really fired up and their anger increases. So avoid no, explain what is happening and redirect.
And that can be really hard as a parent, isn't it? Because tantrums can be really triggering. They trigger how you were parented yourself. You can be upset about how your toddler's behaving in front of people. You can feel embarrassed sometimes, which we should never feel embarrassed about children, but we do. How do we keep our own emotions in check when we're trying to help our little one when they're having a tough time?
So it's remembering that what they're doing is completely normal, number one. Secondly, tantrums have got nothing to do with our parenting skills, and I think that's really hard. We're so harsh on ourselves as parents, and when we see them, trying to bite us or throw things at us, we often do what I call fast forward parenting. What if he's still doing that when he's at kinder? What if he's doing that when he's at school? Remembering this behaviour is developmentally appropriate, and for parents, I really, really need you to keep that in mind.
And when you say that, Dee, it can be really hard in the moment, and you can have had that conversation with your little one and you've tried to, reassure them, and you've tried to redirect, but still it's escalating. What do you suggest that parents do, both to support the little one but also to support their own mental health in that situation?
Very much. Often it's about trying to move away from the trigger, because staying in that moment where whatever was the upsetting item or situation will continue to cycle, because that stimuli is still there for that toddler. So it is about trying to, let's go outside, let's get your bucket, let's go take these 2 cars and we'll put them in our backpack. Which are our 2 favourite cars? So removing yourself and your child away from the trigger is really, really important.
Yeah, that's good distraction. I think always really works, doesn't it? And particularly, when, male parents can pick their kids up and swing them around. I think that they really feel that sense of joy.
They're so lucky to be able to do that. That's so fun.
I know, yes. And it's about movement. I think sometimes we think that engagement in the child, we think, we're rewarding this tantruming behaviour. You're not. You're helping your child self-soothe, self-regulate and ride out this really difficult moment for them.
Yeah, that's right. That connection, isn't it, to them, because the toddlers are so in the moment, and that's what makes them so joyous, actually. Those big toddler cuddles, there's nothing like when they wrap their arms around you and, when they learn to say, I love you, mummy or daddy, that's like the best part of it. So I think we've got to remember when they're having these epic tantrums, that's also the upside of having a toddler, is the reverse of those big emotions. They're awesome when they're great emotions, aren't they?
Yeah. Big feelings, we have to take the good with the bad. and I think seeing tantrums as just an expression of the way they're trying to communicate what's going on for them.
Dee, one other question that we really wanted to talk to you about is, how do we know when tantrums are normal or when there might be another underlying issue? And what are the sort of things that we need, as parents, we need to be aware of?
When we look at tantrums that are happening repeatedly, sometimes there are some underlying factors. It can be fatigue, it can be ill health, it can be anxiety or fear, a lack of trust. So if there's a lot of these behaviours happening and we're seeing a real increase in them, it is important to try to investigate, do some problem solving, work out why they're happening more often, where are they happening, what changes can we put in place as parents to be preventative, and obviously having a really more concerning behaviours, have a chat with your GP, your paediatrician, and do some own research yourself about what we can be trying to do to help support our little ones.
Yeah, that's really good when you're talking there about triggers, because I think even if your child doesn't have a developmental problem or behavioural underlying issue, there are triggers, aren't there? You know, a bit like dogs. I think toddlers are a bit like dogs. They need to be walked. They need to have a lot of food, a lot of sleep. You know, what are some of the triggering factors that as parents we can try and put into place so they don't have a big tantrum?
I think that having routine, having plans, having visual schedules about what's going to happen. It doesn't have to be at what time it's going to be happening, but it's what order. So our toddler begins to know what we have to expect. Yes. We often try to give our children lots of positive experiences, but we need to balance experiences with overstimulation and understanding their world, that sometimes they need to move slower than we've actually got time for. I think we all suffer from hurry sickness. Toddlers have no sense of time, and sometimes when we're pushing them through an experience quickly to meet it on our terms, they can become overwhelmed, and the only way they've got to express themselves is with those big tantrums.
Gosh, it is a roller coaster, isn't it, parenting? It's an amazing, wild roller coaster with these little people. Dee, thank you so much for sharing your insights today on the Expert Guide to Parenthood podcast. Never forget, parents,
You've got this.
Join a Parents You've Got This masterclass today to be prepared, excited and educated for pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood. Visit www.parentsyouvegotthis.com.au and sign up for a masterclass today.